Hello everyone. Happy Monday. It is Maureen from the Color Space team, and I am so excited today to share some more information about lift today. So it's a really exciting Monday because guess what? We are actually live. So changing it up a little bit today. So please, as you sign on here, if you could, always drop in the comments where you're watching from, because we always like to see where people are coming in from. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them today during the live, and we'll stop and do some Q&A from time to time, and then a Q&A session at the end to make sure all of your questions are answered today. So, are you ready to learn more about or all about the lift, right? It's super important in our industry, and we're going to share some tips and tricks, give you some scenarios, a few fun activities today to help you understand more about the lifting process. So, if you don't already, feel free to follow me on my Instagram page at Maureen Bangle, and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we are actually going to go over just to my left here, and we are going to do a fun scenario for you. If you've taken a hair color magic class in the past, this may be familiar to you, but we want to go over it again because it's a great visual for all of you. So come on over. I'm going to try not to slip on my microphone. All right, so this is our activity about developers, right? And so I want to walk you through this a little bit. Each glass here is filled with water, pretty simple, and food coloring, so you can see it a little bit better. Each one of these glasses represents a different Activate developer. So we have 5, 10, 20, 30, and 40. And I'm actually going to drop in Alka-Seltzer tablets into each one of these glasses because I want to show you what the developers do. So I want you to pay attention to a couple of different things. I want you to pay attention to how quickly they all start, how long they all bubble like crazy, and then we're going to do a couple more observations at the end. So, you ready? We have 5 volume, 10 volume, 20 volume, 30 volume, and last but not least, 40 volume. So as they start working, you can see it takes a second for them to all get really going. And I'm going to point out, watch 30 and 40. They're getting a little bit active, right? Hopefully we don't have any spillovers today. I've done this a bunch of times, so I think maybe, I don't know, we'll see. A little bit of overspill. So what this represents is working time, right? How much working time does each of the developers have, right? So we know we have things like persulfates in our powder lighteners, and that's pretty much industry-wide. Any brand that you use will have persulfates in them. And those are going to help go in and clear out the melanin in the hair and help pull it out, which makes the hair appear lighter and brighter. So the developers are actually our working time. How much time are they going to work? So we have, like you said, 5 through 40 volume here. So I'd like to show you a little. I'm going to have Vanessa zoom in here in just a little bit. But when you look at the paper, it might be hard to pick this up on camera, but you can see we have some spillover. Well, that's obvious, but we have some dots on the paper. And that kind of represents some of the activity that we had with the developers. And I also want to point out how much cleaner our lower developers are than our higher developers. So a way you could look at that, the way I always reference it, is the stuff that's left on the glass when we're mixing these Activate developers with our Lift Silver Powder Lightener or our Freehand. Like you said, they're super active when you get into the higher developers. So that stuff around the edge of the glass, think of that as natural remaining pigment. The other scenario I used to use all the time was Pac-Man. How many of you are 80s and 90s kids remember the game Pac-Man, right? So think of Pac-Man as our developer with our lightener, And think of NRP as all the little dots that you had to eat as Pac-Man, right? So on regular speed, think of that as like 5, 10, maybe even 20 volume. It's easy to get all those dots or all of that NRP. It cleans things out really well. When we get to 30 and 40 volume, what happens is they're so active that it's almost like Pac-Man on the speed round where you get real anxious trying to get all the dots. They don't clean out NRP as well because they are so active in their nature. So think of that when you're choosing your developer to mix with your lift powder lightener, your silver powder lightener, or your lift freehand. Which one is going to give you the cleaner lift? Lower and slower is always going to give you cleaner lift. Now, I know what everybody's going to ask, but what if I'm in a hurry? And somebody came in, a client came in, Mrs. Smith came in and she's only down for a color, but she decided she wants highlights too. I need a hired developer to get her finished quicker. Not necessarily true. So I did some swatches for you. Actually I did them on 2 different levels just to give you some different visuals, but on your far left is the starting swatches. So that's without any lightener. All the other lighteners I did mixed 1:2 ratio with our silver powder lightener, 5 volume, 10 volume, 20, 30, and 40. And who can tell me they all processed for 20 minutes? What is different? I'm going to bring them closer to you so you can see them. You ready? That's our lighter swatch. And here is our darker swatch. So remember, our lightener, our silver lift powder lightener, mixed 1:2 for 20 minutes. Not much difference, right? So here's the big aha moment. Our higher developers don't work faster. They actually work longer. The higher the number on the developer bottle, the longer working time or more working time you have with that developer. So let's do one more visual to help solidify this concept. Ready? Hang on one second. Gotta grab my marker. All right, so the other scenario that I use a lot in class is the car and the gas scenario. So think of your car as your, let's say, silver powder lightener, and the gas is going to be your activate developer. So if we had 4 cars outside that were parked, I labeled them 10, 20, 30, and 40 volume, right? That's my lift silver powder lightener in this case. And my 10 volume is going to have 1/4 of a tank of gas. 20 volume is going to have half a tank, 3/4 of a tank for 30, and a full tank for 40 volume, right? In that first 20 minutes, as you just saw with my swatches, all of those developers, 5, 10, 20, 30, and 40, in the first 20 minutes, they all lifted exactly the same. All the same in the first 20 minutes. It's what happens after that first 20 minutes that sets them apart. So 10 volume will run out of gas before 20 volume. 20 volume will run out before 30, and 30 will run out before 40 volume. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your developer choice, right? There are a couple of things I want to point out. Remember, our lower developers are going to run out of gas sooner than your higher developers. Your higher developers will give you more working time. So it's not that 40 volume, that car is going to get you to your destination any faster. It's that it'll get you further. It'll allow you to keep lifting, right? 10 volume is beautiful. I use it all the time in foils. It's probably my favorite to use because I love the beautiful clean lift that I am left with. Another tip too is 30 and 40 volume are super active. We saw that in our cups, right? We saw how active they were and how bubbly they were. Well, 30 and 40 volume do something with that activity. They actually eat away or kill off persulfates. And what did persulfates do? Persulfates that are in your powder lightener are going to kill off those it'll kill off those persulfates. Those persulfates that are in your powder is what breaks up melanin and helps pull it out of the hair to give you lighter and brighter results. So you want those persulfates. They're your friends, right? We want to get lift from them. We need their help. So 30 and 40 volume are great when you're doing things like open air techniques, hair painting, if you're doing balayage, because you need their working time. But not necessarily the best if you're using it in a foil. Another great example of what 30 and 40 volume can do sometimes is if you've ever used them to highlight, you'll see at the end when you rinse them down, sometimes you'll get some shadows or you feel like it never gets past baby chick yellow. And that could be why. So I challenge you, if you don't believe me, that's okay. I didn't believe it at first either. Get out a mannequin, try them side by side. Makes a huge difference. The visual is amazing. And remember, your power is in the powder, either your Lift Silver Powder Lightener or your Lift Freehand Lightener. Your developer, your Activate developer is your working time. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to see if Vanessa here has any questions for me at this point. Not at the moment. Okay, so I hope that was a couple good visuals for all of you to help understand the differences with your Activate developers and what they do in terms of lift. So remember, they're not going to necessarily be faster, but they are going to work longer, the higher the number on the bottle. Another thing to keep in mind is hair type. So I know it sounds kind of silly, but my sister will attest to this, that I am the queen of metaphors or visuals because that's how my mind works. So these are your hair types, right? We have fine hair. So this is kind of skinny hair. We have medium hair, and then we have coarse hair. So we all know that these lift a little bit differently, right? We all have seen it do that. Skinny, fine hair, this is individual hair strands, right? So fine hair is gonna lift super easy. Coarse hair might be a little bit more difficult, right? So I like to think of these as boxers, fighters, right? That go into a ring. Do I need to put a heavyweight developer into the boxing ring with a featherweight fighter? No, it wouldn't be a fair fight. Same goes for, you might need a little bit more of a heavyweight developer to help with make an equal fight with your heavyweight fighter, right? So keep that in mind. What is in front of you? Be present and look at your guest and figure out what it is, what kind of hair type they have, and how would I adjust my developers accordingly. I will say, I know I get asked this question an awful lot. What developer do I usually use in foil? My personal aesthetic is usually about 3 to maximum 4 levels of difference between someone's base or natural color and their highlighted color. So I usually use 5 or 10 volume, sometimes 20. If I know, we've all had these guests, right? If we have somebody who's maybe a natural level 4 and wants to be a highlighted level 25, right? We need the working time for that hair to lighten. So I never go over 20 volume in foil. I haven't done anything over 20 volume in foil for a really long time. But I have to let the lightener and the Activate developer do its job. So sometimes timing plays a part. Both of our color space lighteners, the Silver Lift powder and the Freehand powder, we say processing time minimum of about 15 to 20 minutes, maximum 55. So keep that in mind, right? A lot of my processing times on freehand or balayage, hair painted or balayage techniques are usually pushing that 45 to 50 minute processing time because I need the lightener and the developer I need to give them time to let them do their job. So keep that in mind, right? Remember your hair type, remember your cars with the gas, Alka-Seltzer, whatever it is. But just remember, it's not always about speed. Sometimes it's what do they say? It's not the sprint. It's a marathon sometimes, especially if you're lifting a long way. So let them do their job. All right. Any questions yet? No? All right. All right. You guys are doing awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about mixing. So how many of you, do me a favor, in the comments below, go ahead and drop me a black heart if you love your Color Space Unimix. It's an awesome tool. We love it. There are a couple different ways to mix our lighteners, and I want to show you those before we get into a couple little application techniques. So the first one is I actually mixed this one already for us. This is the Unimix mixing my silver powder lightener and my Activate Developer just in the Unimix for 2 minutes. So remember here, each of our lighteners, whichever one you are doing, whichever one you are using on your guest, make sure that you are mixing it without heat on the Unimix. It's really important. We don't want to kill off anything or make our formula unstable, right? So no heat, but just go ahead and mix. This is a great consistency for a lot of people. It's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit more dense, I would almost say. I know it sounds kind of funny, but it's a little bit more dense. This is mixed 1 to 2, which is great. That's my favorite ratio to mix my lighteners at, but this is a 1 to 2 ratio. You can also mix with a whisk. I prefer this way, and I'll tell you why, a couple different reasons why actually. I prefer this way because I like the texture. It's a little bit fluffier to me, and that's what I am used to and I really like and I'm most comfortable working with. I would also say that I like whisking my silver powder lightener or my Freehand because this Unimix gets its workout in our salon. I don't know about you guys, but for us, it definitely gets a workout. And if we have used this to mix a hair color, we've used heat. And sometimes, even though we're not gonna push the heat button to mix our lightener, sometimes that plate is still kind of warm. And actually, when that happens, I have found that I get a little bit more expansion from my product, which can run into bleeders down the line. And again, that's what heat does to that formula. It creates an unstable environment. So I prefer just to use a whisk, and I whisk it for about 45 seconds. I also will take, the best part about whisking for me is that I mix small batches very often. Because in that first 20 minutes we showed you with the cars, they all lift the same. That's when you get the best lifting power or a kick of lift is in that first 20 minutes. So for me, I like to take multiple bowls of my Activate Developer and powder lightener out with me to my station and whisk 45 seconds when I need more product. It saves me walking back and forth to the Unimix, which is in dispense usually. So I would suggest that because again, super easy to do. It doesn't ruin your method to your madness, right? Your consistency. It keeps going. It keeps everything very smooth. So I prefer a whisk. Last but not least, I want to show you one more way to mix this. And this is actually Loopy's new favorite way to mix the silver powder lightener. That is to put your Activate Developer in your bowl, put it on the Unimix, put your magnet in, whoop, be careful not to spill, and then I'm going to turn my mixer on and I'm going to sprinkle in my lightener as it mixes. Are you ready? So what this does actually is it will help to get a nice even consistency in the bowl. It gets a little bit fluffier consistency, and you can almost hear it now. I don't know if you guys can hear that on the microphone or the camera, but actually you don't hear that grittiness anymore. Sometimes when you put both products in, it can kind of, this helps, I guess, dissolve the lightener to me a little bit easier. That's what I notice about it. And like I said, you can hear there's not that grittiness you first heard at the beginning. So it's a great way to mix your lightener too. So try it out, you guys. Let us know what your favorite method is, right? So we did black for the Unimix, if that's your favorite method. Do a white heart if whisking is your favorite method. And do a, we'll do this for Loopy. Drop a pink heart in the comments below if you're a sprinkler. So one more tip before I step away from my Unimix actually. So this came up, and this is the funniest thing for us on the Color Space team. And it comes up a lot. So for those of you who have a Unimix, just want to give you this little tip. Or those of you that are going to get a Unimix, remember this. So this is the scale that comes with the Unimix. It actually comes in a leather pouch. Take that off. And then if you find that you have problems with the scale reading, sometimes it doesn't work very well. Actually, it took, how many Color Space trainers did it take to figure this one out? I don't know, quite a few of us. There's actually a cover. So remove this guy to get better readings on your scale. I know it sounds silly, but it took us a while to figure it out because it looks like it should be there, right? We all had a very good laugh at that one. Don't forget to take the covers off your scales, guys. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit different texture, a little bit fluffier texture with the sprinkle on this one versus a little bit runnier and dense formula on just everything in the bowl at once, and Unimixed just on its own. So couple things there. With Freehand, you can either do the Unimix, same thing, all at once, a sprinkle, whisk, that's my favorite, and my friend Haley Reeb, her favorite is mixing Freehand with a spatula, and she loves the consistency of that. She also loves it to actually help clean off her hair painting or balayage board. So are you ready to do a couple tips, learn a couple of tips on how to use these lighteners to get maximum results? All right, let's try it out. Ready? All right. So I have our mannequin here, and I'm just going to share with you some of the things that I have learned since using our two really amazing products. So the first, we're going to do foiling, and then on the other side, we're actually going to do some hair painting. So you guys can see some of the methods that I use, and like you said, tips and tricks. So for foiling, let's say we're going to weave this guy. I am going to grab my foil. I'm a folder under. I'm going to lift that hair up to get that foil really tight underneath. And I want to point this out. So first, I'm going to apply my product, keep my brush nice and clean. I have found I really like to start a little bit further out and work my way up to the edge of the foil, right? So the reason I find that is I really find that that helps with any bleeders and expansion of the product that you may get. Wherever you place that brush first is where you're going to get the most product. So want to make sure that you apply it a little bit further away and work your way up. I would also say when you're applying this product, this is remember the Lift Silver Powder Lightener, to saturate. I like to brush back and forth, not just up and down, because I want to make sure that that product is really in there, right? I really want to make sure that I've got good saturation. If it's not saturated, I promise you your lift will not be the best it could be. So we're going to do another one here because I'm going to show you some more tips and tricks on this second one. So the other thing I have learned, I actually learned this trick from Loopy. When you are applying your product, you want to make sure that you lift that foil up. So again, I'm going to start a little bit further down, get the majority of my product there, and work my way up to the fold of the foil. And then what I like to do is, the reason I like to fold under is because I like to get my finger under that fold there that I have created and get that hair, lift that foil up so that hair is out 90 degrees from the scalp. If you apply really hard down this way sometimes, what you'll end up with is you'll end up with those, not bleeders, but you'll end up with those hot spots that you guys ever seen that? Those hot spots along the edge of the foil? That will help, that little trick of lifting the foil up, making sure the hair is out at a 90-degree angle when you're applying that product. That's one little tip and trick that'll help. Last but not least, to help make sure your foils are beautiful and saturated and lift perfectly without any problems, is keep your folding of your foil to a minimum. So what does that mean? We've seen a lot in the field. We've seen a lot of people, especially when they're learning, because let's face it, when we're learning, we forget a lot of things. What we've seen is we've seen a lot of this, hard creasing, and maybe another fold really tight, and then we really button this up really, really tight. And as pretty as that looks, we don't allow for that product to do any expanding, right? So when we tighten it up like that, when that product expands a little bit, from just the natural makeup of the product, but also, I don't know about you where you are, but here in the Midwest, I'm in Wisconsin, we have a lot of hard water buildup. So that does create a chemical reaction, really causes that product to swell, and we can definitely end up with bleeders leaking out, that product leaking out of the foil. So you'll sometimes leaking, sometimes we call them Jiffy Pop foils where they really puff up. So don't fold those super tight. When you are folding your foils, you can do a couple different things. You can do sandwiches. You can do just fold it in half. And when you do fold it, again, just fold it lightly. So again, starting away from that edge of the foil, working your way up, holding it out at 90 degrees from the head, working your product back and forth. For saturation, I like to think cupcake frosting. I don't remember who taught me that a long time ago. Cupcake frosting versus glazed donut. So you want to make sure that there's enough product on there. When you do fold this up, so I like to just pinch at the corners there. I don't really like to fold that super hard. And then you can actually just fold it once. If you want to lock your foils in, if you do have a hard time with your foil staying in place, you can just crease a little fold with the teeth of your comb along that one side of the foil. Don't do both because it'll be difficult to remove it. But if you fold along that one side, that'll help keep those foils nice and sturdy too. So, any questions so far on foiling techniques to help out with keeping your foils in, keeping away from bleeders, anything like that?
We did have one earlier about the whisking, and I believe you addressed it, but just to confirm, with the whisk, it's not 2 minutes, it's 45 seconds.
So the question is, when you're whisking your lightener, Do you whisk it for just 45 seconds or do you whisk it for the full 2 minutes? I whisk it for about 45 seconds to 60 seconds, to be honest. 2 minutes, my arm would fall off. Sorry. I got to work on that arm strength a little bit, I guess. But for me, 45 seconds to 60 seconds is really a good sweet spot to make sure that I'm not getting overmixed. It's the point of whisking for that long, regardless of what technique you use, is making sure that that powder is completely dissolved into the Activate developer. When it's completely dissolved, then we know it is fully activated and it's at its full potential. So another tip here is whether you whisk or whether you Unimix, whatever that may be, make sure you're not doing that until you are ready to put it on the hair. Remember, those first 20 minutes is when you get maximum lift, or you get that first boost of lift. So don't whisk it or mix it and then go part off your guest for a full highlight and waste that valuable time. Make sure that you whisk or mix right before it's ready to go on the hair to get optimum results and optimum lift in those first 20 minutes. So hope that helps. All right, so now on this side, I decided I'm gonna do a little bit of freehand. So I can show you, I just, again, my friend Haley Reed did a video, a reel on Luis Gonzalez's Instagram yesterday. And I thought it was a great way of showing you how to use the freehand. So I've got my freehand. This was whisked because, again, like I said, it's my favorite. I am going to take my paddle, and you can do this one of two ways, but I like to do it this way sometimes. I like to take my product and actually load it up on my board. I like a board, and it's a great way of putting it onto the board nice and neatly. Then I'm going to take my brush, and like I said, I like to use a board for this for a couple different reasons. It's a little bit easier for me to work off of. I would also say it gives me better application for my brush. I can work a little bit cleaner. It gives me something to work off of when I'm saturating through the hair. And last but not least, I think it really helps with the consistency of working with this product. So the one thing that you will notice is this product is gum-based. So it's a little bit more fragile in terms of products that you may have used in the past, clay-based products specifically. They're a little bit thicker. This is a little bit lighter and a little bit more fragile. So it may take a little getting used to. It took me a little bit of getting used to. So don't worry about it. Practice makes perfect. You'll get it. You'll get it. You can mix this in different ratios. This is actually 1 to 2. So it's a little bit softer. Because this is gum-based, this will not dry out the hair. Think about what clay does in skincare, right? It pulls moisture out, and clay lighteners can do that to the hair as well. So being gum-based, this actually helps keep the hair nice and moisturized and in really good condition. So applied that product to my paddle first. I then took my brush and just dipped into that so you get a nice bead along your brush, which I love. I'm going to hold this with really good tension, and I'm just going to start painting. So those of us on the team have really enjoyed getting back to doing some hair painting and balayage now that we have a really different product to work with. Super easy to blend, I find. When you're talking about saturation, remember where there's a little bit less saturation, glazed donut, right? You're going to get a little bit less lift, a little bit more blend, and where it's really saturated, cupcake frosting. I'm going to grab a little bit more here actually. Cupcake frosting, that's where you're going to get your maximum lift. The color of this one, if you guys haven't noticed, if you haven't used it before, it is green. And the reason it's green is because it's easy to mistaken your lift on a product that is white. How many times has that happened to you guys? Put that little raise your hand emoji in the comments below. Anybody ever use a product that was white in color and it looked like it was light enough, and then you took it down at the shampoo bowl, and then you'd have what we used to call, us hair color magicians, I should say, hair color magicians. You know what we used to call that? We used to call that a situation. We've all had those at the bowl, right? If you've been doing hair long enough, you've had those. The thing about a great colorist is they can make beautiful color. A great colorist can fix those situations from time to time when they arise. So, I'm going to do one little section more here, and then I'm going to move on to some tips and tricks and some recap. So this spatula is also really great if your board gets messy, to scrape it off, clean it up, and reapply it. So then I take it the opposite direction. Remember, I get that little bead of color that's on there. And apply this color. So like you said, super creamy. You can mix this in a different ratio if you'd like. I'm going to clean off my brush handle in just a second here. So you can mix both your silver powder lightener and your freehand in 1 to 1.5 ratios, 1 to 2 ratios, or if those are too much one way or the other, too loose or too tight for you, you can go ahead and mix in 1.75 as well. So hope that helps. Give you a few tips on application of your silver powder lightener and your freehand lightener as well. So let's go back over to our flip chart and we'll do some recapping. Ready? How are y'all doing? Everybody doing okay still? Questions? No? All right. You guys are rock stars. Okay, so for mixing our Lift Silver Powder Lightener, you can do 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2. And like I said, if it's too much one way or the other, do 1 to 1.75. I know there's a bunch of us out there that maybe didn't mix or weigh your ingredients or components before, but I challenge you this week to try it out. You'll probably get better, you'll probably find a mixture you like best, right? But more importantly, you will have more consistent results, I promise you. I know it sounds funny, but it's super simple. It's really quick. Just find your perfect mix. With that, your mix, I'm going to say, find out whether you like Unimix everything together in the bowl with a magnet, whisking it by hand, or developer in the bowl first and sprinkle in your silver powder lightener or your freehand. I want to see which technique you love the most. For Lift Freehand Powder Lightener, same thing. 1 to 1.5, 1 to 2, or you can find that middle ground, 1 to 1.75. We want to make sure you are most comfortable using it, whatever that ratio may be. But we want to keep it in between 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2. We want to make sure you do that. So Unimix, whisk, spatula, or sprinkle here. So you have 4 different ways to mix your freehand powder lightener. And like you said, it's all about customization, everybody, right? With our silver powder lightener, you can mix this with any of your Activate developers. Remember, the lower the developer, the lower, the slower the lift, the cleaner it is in the end. Your higher developers, you can use them, but I would say be careful with them, watch them, and you'll probably have a little bit more work to do at the end, or you may get uneven results. With Lift Freehand Powder Lightener, same thing here. It can be mixed with any of our Activate developers, but we do recommend 30 or 40 volume because you need the working time. 10 volume or maybe even 20 volume, because you're doing an open air technique with either hair painting or balayage, you may not get the lift you're looking for because it's going to exhaust itself being in open air before you get to your final destination. So keep that in mind, right? Can you use freehand in a foil? We don't recommend it. However, if you'd like a little bit more insulation for a freehand or balayage technique, you can sandwich it between foil. But again, we do not recommend folding it in any way, because that product is so fragile that you may create an unstable environment and will not get the results you're looking for. So up to 9 levels of lift here, depending upon your hair type, up to 7 levels of lift with our freehand. And when we're talking in color space talk, that's not universal lifting levels. This is actual levels. So up to 9, up to 7, but for those higher levels of lift, or the more levels of lift, remember timing is really important. Letting it do its job, right? Last but not least, for either one of these, no heat, none whatsoever. So not under a dryer. Don't use the heat on the Unimix. It'll compromise the product. Like you said, what we have discovered is there have been some folks who it seems that they have mixed their powder lightener on the Unimix after a color has been mixed up. And not that they used heat, but that plate was still warm. It may cause a little bit more expansion of the product. So like I said, just make sure that that plate is cold, or go ahead and whisk it. No heat at all here. All right, so tips and tricks. This is to kind of wrap everything up and make sure we went through everything we wanted to today. So I recommend mixing small batches and often. I know a standard batch of freehand or silver powder lightener is going to be 30 grams of your lightener and 60 mils of your developer of choice. For me, I actually like to take that in half, because like I said, it takes me about 20 minutes to get through that batch if I'm doing any foil work. So by the time that powerful 20 minutes of lift is up, I'm remixing, right? Remixing, I promise you, is going to give you better results than upping your developer from back to front. If you are one of those folks that likes to remix with different developer from back to front, it's not necessarily that higher developer is giving you faster lift for it to catch up. The trick that's actually happening is that you're remixing and you're getting that 20 minutes of really good lift. So mix small batches and often. Like I said, I like to mix, I shouldn't say mix, I like to place my lightener and my developer in a bowl, multiple bowls, and take them with me out to my station and whisk them as I need them. Choose your developer wisely. Remember, lower, slower gives us cleaner lift. We saw that with our Alka-Seltzer in the glasses, right? Really, really, really important. Keep your developers low and really be present and be smart in your developer choice based on your guest's hair type. I promise you'll get better results. Be aware of your foil folding. Right? So make sure you're not folding those foils too tight. Make sure you're not creasing too much. If you crease those foils, like I said, as pretty as they look, you run the risk of wiping or pushing that product off of the hair, so you'll get a band in that foil. And again, we want to make sure that product has room to do its thing. So if you don't fold those foils too tightly or too much, you can actually make sure it's a safeguard for any bleeders, or making sure that those foils puff up as little as possible if you have some sort of reaction with product or mineral buildup on the hair. Let it work. It is meant to process for a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes, a maximum of 55. The longer it sits, the higher or more lift, the lighter it can get. So I know everybody has a hard time wanting to, I only have 30 minutes, I gotta wash that off. Think about what you're doing. Think about your appointments, 2 or 3 appointments out. If someone wants to go lighter, make sure you have that extra time for them to process more, right? Let it do its thing on a bleach application, a universal lightening application where you're doing on the scalp lightening. Our silver powder lightener is beautiful. We want to make sure that we add our bond to those formulas for on the scalp to protect the scalp. But to me, bleach and tones or universal lightening processing is the one thing I will say about that is I know this is probably not popular in our network or in our industry, but those to me need to be babysat, right? Those aren't just apply the color, walk away and let it process, right? It needs to be reapplied, it needs to be checked, it needs to make sure it's saturated and working so that you get the best lift you possibly can. But timing is everything. Saturation, whether you're doing a foil, whether you're doing freehand or balayage, hair painting, whatever it may be, make sure your saturation is really, really saturated. If you can definitely go back and check to see if your product has dried out. If it's wet, it's working. If it's dry, it's dead. That still applies in any lightening process technique that you're doing. So if you're struggling with lift, please make sure to check your saturation. When you're doing freehand or hair painting or balayage, where you have less saturation, glaze donut, so you can see the hair through it, you'll get more of a blend where it's more saturated and heavy on the product. You will have better lift. It is definitely key. So, any questions for today? Anything come up? If you guys come up with something later, please feel free to send me a DM. I'm always willing to answer questions. Send a question to ColorSpace, or this will be on IGTV. You can definitely drop your questions in the comment section and we'll be checking in to make sure we get those answered for you. I want to make sure you guys have awesome lift with both our Lift Silver Powder Lightener and our Lift Freehand. They are two really amazing products that are giving us all sorts of great results. Completely customizable, like you said, that's probably my favorite, is I can customize it, my mixing, I can customize my mixing ratios for texture. I can use all sorts of developer to create all sorts of amazing things. So, great products. Every Monday, don't forget, every Monday right here on ColorSpace_hair on our Instagram, we have complimentary education. Every Monday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and I think noon on the West Coast. Next up, we have the beautiful and extremely talented Vanessa Bianchi. She is amazing. I just love her. She is doing root shadows and lowlights next week. And that makes me very excited because we focus as hairstylists, we focus so much on the light and bright that sometimes we forget that shadows are required to make those light and bright pieces really pop. So it's going to be an amazing Instagram TV next week with Miss Bianchi, and I can't wait to see it. I hope you guys learned something about that lift today. I hope you get amazing lift in whatever you're doing. Hope these tips and tricks helped you guys out, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care, everybody. Have a good Monday.